Stories from the Growing Years by Arleta Richardson. Chapter 8. The Anniversary. Gladys Burton was not in church one Sunday morning in April. When she failed to appear in the evening service as well, I stopped Zachary and asked about her.
Is Gladys ill today?
Well, no, not exactly. She's just feeling a mite peckish lately.
Never kept her away from church before, Augusta commented. She usually comes and pecks on us.
That's what I told her,
Zachary said.
She didn't even act like she heard me. Fact is, I'm worried about her. She hasn't given me a good tongue lashing for a week now.
This is serious, Sarah Jane said as we walked to our buggies. Something must be weighing pretty heavy on Gladys to make her shirk her duty. She paused to think a moment. Have you ever noticed that however much you hate something, you worry if it stops when it shouldn't?
That hadn't come to my attention before, but I guess I know what you mean.
I sighed.
I suppose I'll have to go over there and call on her this week. It seems like the minister's wife is as much responsible for the flock as the minister is. There are days when I remember why I said I'd never marry a preacher.
You'd be the same kind of person no matter who you married, Mabel. If someone was in trouble, you'd be there. Various duties at home kept me from getting to the Burtons before the middle of the week. Zachary met me at the door and I followed him to the kitchen. I was startled to see Gladys seated at the table, her hands folded in front of her. It occurred to me that I had probably never seen Gladys sitting down in her own house. She looked at me bleakly.
How are you, Gladys? Zachary says you've not been too well lately.
I'm well,
she replied. At least I'm not sick in bed.
I waited for a further explanation, and for a few moments I thought there might not be one. Then Gladys spoke again.
I suppose you're here to make me change my mind.
About what?
About coming back to church. I'll worship God here at home. At least he doesn't talk behind anyone's back, like some I could mention. You can go back and tell all the ladies that Gladys Burton can do very well without them.
Of course, I had no intention of doing that, but I did confide in Sarah Jane.
She refused to tell me what was said or who she thought said it. I know that she's threatened to leave the church at least once a month over something, but this time it sounds as though she really means it. What shall we do?
If that we includes me, Sarah Jane replied, I'll tell you what my part can be. I'll cut a wide swath around the whole situation and stay on the outside of it. If you're smart, you will too. I considered that advice while I prepared supper that night. In a way, Sarah Jane was right. Whatever dispute Gladys had with her neighbors was between her and them. I could be making myself a part of the problem. On the other hand, I felt sympathy for Gladys.
She is a prickly sort of person,
I said to Len. He lowered his book and gave me a confused look. Who is? He asked.
Gladys Burton. I forgot you weren't listening to what I was thinking. I'm worried about her, but I don't think I should interfere. How do you tell someone that she's annoying people?
I don't think you have to, Len replied. A better question would be, why do you let her annoy you? When the ladies met to work on the quilt, Gladys was not there and her absence was duly noted. She's been in a snit before, but it doesn't usually last this long, Dorcas remarked. We could always count on hearing all the details of the wrongs she suffered.
How long have you known Gladys? Colleen asked. Has she been in North Branch all her life?
She came here as a young girl, Augusta answered. Finished grammar school and hired out to work for the old Burtons, right there on the place where she is now. Everyone thought she had her eye on the oldest boy, but it was Zachary she married. I remember hearing that she felt sorry for Zachary because he was wounded in the war, Ma Williams put in. Maybe she regrets not taking his brother. After all these years, that could have an effect on your disposition, all right. I feel sorry for her, Elizabeth said. I know what it is like not to have any friends. You begin to feel as if they don't care. You don't either, but the truth is, you do. I've changed my mind about getting involved with Gladys's troubles, Sarah Jane announced as we rode home. From what I can gather, no one has ever done anything nice for that woman.
It's not hard to see why,
I replied. Sarah Jane nodded. True. The hardest person to love are the ones who need it most.
So what are we going to do? She doesn't seem to want any help.
I don't know, Sarah Jane replied, but I'm going to think of something. In the days that followed, Gladys went about her business, stern-faced and unsociable. Since no one knew what to say to her, she was avoided even more than usual. Even Zachary was beginning to lose patience with the situation.
I'm tired of listening to the rocking chair squeak, he declared. We've been married 40 years come May, and she's never been out of words before. I'd even be glad to hear her complain about something.
So would I, Colleen said. No one calls her, and she doesn't answer anyone else's ring anymore. It's been almost 2 weeks now that this has gone on, I fumed to Len. It seems time that a group of ladies who profess to love one another could find a way to help one who is hurting.
Have you talked it over?
Of course, I replied. Every time we're together. Some of them think Gladys is sowing what she's reaped, and they may be right. Most everyone agrees that she'd be easier to get along with if she minded her own business and stopped complaining about everything.
She's made a start on that, Len said. It doesn't seem to have made anyone feel better. He looked at me thoughtfully. What do you think?
I think it's our fault, I replied miserably. I've noticed that whenever Gladys is mentioned, it's a critical comment. There has to be something good we could say about her, but we haven't looked for it.
Sarah Jane and I were in Gage's store when Dorcas brought up the matter again. It would be easier to do something if we knew what the problem was. No one remembers saying anything behind her back that could have upset her like that. I started to remark that it would have been pretty hard to do since she had been on the telephone whenever anyone else was. But I thought better of it. This was just the kind of comment that had gotten us where we were.
Didn't Zachary say they have a 40th wedding anniversary the 1st of May?
Sarah Jane said.
I think it's time for a celebration. We have a week and a half to get it planned.
The idea was met with enthusiasm, and we began at once to organize the party. Everyone was anxious to contribute, and we had volunteers from all around town.
We'd like to keep it a surprise for both of them, I said to Len. But if Zachary doesn't know, there's no way to get Gladys out. So many people want to come that we're going to use the town hall. Oh, Len, I hope this helps her to see that she has friends who care about her.
Myra Grayson offered to make a wedding cake, and Rebecca and Colleen worked on a banner to put across the front of the room. The school teacher, Mary Webster, provided a lively program with all the children taking part. We never need to worry about having enough food for a crowd here in North Branch, Ma Williams said, and Gladys is probably the best cook among us. I wonder if I've ever told her that. As the day approached, I began to feel apprehensive.
What if Gladys refuses to come? I asked Sarah Jane. Or what if she comes but doesn't have a good time?
She'll come, Sarah Jane assured me. Zachary will see to that. No one can make her have a good time, but at least we've done our best. Actually, this one day isn't going to be the answer to the problem. Unless we change our attitudes and accept Gladys the way she is, we won't be doing her much good.
The 1st of May was a glorious spring day, and as I hurried through my morning work and got Alma and Claire ready to go, I prayed that the celebration would bring healing and peace to Gladys. Agnes Lawton and her girls arranged the tables, and when we walked into the hall, Agnes hurried over to me. "Everything is ready," she said. "Zachary promised they'd be here by 11 o'clock. I can't wait to see how surprised Gladys will be." The crowd gathered and waited expectantly for the Burtons to arrive. When they finally came, the look on Gladys's face was not what I would have described as surprised. Shock, dismay, and disbelief registered as she took in the people, the big banner proclaiming "Happy Anniversary, Zachary and Gladys," and the tables loaded with food.
"I thought she was going to turn and run," Sarah Jane said as we talked it over later. "I certainly didn't expect her to burst into tears."
Zachary awkwardly patted Gladys on the back, and several of us ran over to put our arms around her.
"You shouldn't have done this,"
she sobbed.
We wanted to, Gladys. This is an important day for you. Not everyone completes 40 years of marriage. We thought it would be nice to let you know how glad we are for you and Zachary.
I don't deserve to have anything nice done for me, she repeated. I'm a perfectly awful person.
Why, Gladys, I said, that's not so. None of us is easy to get along with all the time, but that doesn't make us bad people. We've been so worried about you because you haven't come to church or the sewing circles or called on the telephone. We're sorry if we've hurt your feelings and we want you to forgive us.
That's right, Rebecca put in. We wouldn't hurt you for the world. To our dismay, Gladys began to sob again.
I don't need to forgive you, she said. I'm the one who is to blame. I haven't talked to anyone because I feel so guilty about saying what I did about Mabel.
About me? I exclaimed. I haven't heard that you said anything about me.
Gladys dabbed at her eyes and looked stricken.
It was last month,
she said.
I happened to be coming down the street when I saw you and Sarah Jane going into Gage's store. Then I saw that Claire was asleep in the buggy and Alma was sitting beside him.
I remembered the occasion, but I couldn't imagine what it had to do with Gladys's story. She went on.
When I was talking to someone on the telephone, I said it was too bad that the minister's wife couldn't look after two little children instead of gallivanting around town and leaving them to take care of themselves.
I thought this was mild in comparison with some things that Gladys had said to my face, but she hadn't finished her confession yet.
Later, I just happened to pick up the telephone and heard that person telling someone else that the minister's wife was neglecting her children and should be reported to the authorities.
Gladys wiped her eyes again.
I knew I hadn't said that or even thought it. I began to wonder how many other things I've said that were misunderstood and repeated wrongly. It's no wonder I don't have any friends. I decided the only thing to do was to keep my big mouth shut and stop using the telephone.
She looked around the circle of ladies.
I figured none of you would care if you never heard anything from me again.
Gladys, Augusta said, there is no one in this town with a bigger mouth than mine. Everyone knows that I often say what I think before I think of it. The Bible warns us that the tongue is the hardest thing to control, but the Lord certainly has forgiveness for that. Goodness knows I've had to ask him often enough. I hugged Gladys tightly.
Don't you think about it again, I said. You were right. I shouldn't have left the children alone in the buggy, but I didn't want to wake Claire and we were just gone for a few minutes. Come on now, let's enjoy the party and just say we've learned our lesson.
Gladys was soon smiling happily. That evening, I thought I'd call Sarah Jane and see if she agreed that the party was a success. I lifted the telephone receiver and heard Gladys's voice.
I've certainly never had a day like this in my whole life, Rebecca, she said. Most everyone in town must have been there at some time. Say, did you have some of Hilda's brown Betty? Did you think you could have used a tad more cinnamon? Oh, not that it wasn't absolutely delicious. I don't think I could have done better myself.
I gently replaced the receiver.
Well, Gladys is back, I said to Len. The day was good for all of us.
End of chapter 8.